Before we start, take a moment to like and subscribe. What happens when a man rises to absolute power, not through a coherent philosophy, but through a terrifying blend of raw charisma, physical might, and unbridled madness? That is the unflinching saga of Idi Amin Dada Umi, a story so bizarre it reads like a work of fiction. Yet it left a trail of destruction and death that was all too real. His life was a descent from a powerful soldier into a monstrous dictator, a tale of theatrical excess and unimaginable cruelty. Idi Amin's origin story is shrouded in the mists of folklore and conflicting accounts, a reflection of the man himself, larger than life and impossible to pin down. Born around 1925 in the remote northwestern region of Uganda, he was a member of the small Kakwa ethnic group. His father, a farmer from the Lugbara tribe, converted to Islam, and his mother was a traditional healer from the Kakwa. Amin's childhood was spent in a nomadic lifestyle, stark and unforgiving environment that required resilience and strength. He received little to no formal schooling, but his education came from the unforgiving bush and the hardscrabble realities of colonial Uganda. This upbringing shaped his brutal worldview and survivalist instincts. He grew into a man of gargantuan proportions, a physical titan standing well over 6 feet tall and weighing over 250 pounds. His size and imposing presence were his greatest assets, a raw, unfiltered power that captivated those around him. In 1946, he walked into a recruiting office and, with no formal education, managed to enlist in the King's African Rifles Corps, the British colonial army. The British officers, often dismissive of the local population, were captivated by his immense physique. They saw in him a brute force they could mold into a fearsome soldier, a perfect instrument for their colonial agenda. Though lacking intellect, Amin compensated with ruthless aggression and blind obedience. Amin was not a strategic mastermind, but he was a soldier of immense loyalty and ferocity. He served with distinction, earning a reputation as a brutal but effective combatant. He was deployed to Kenya during the Momo Uprising, a brutal counterinsurgency campaign against nationalist rebels. It was here that Amin's reputation for unrestrained cruelty first emerged, as he was accused of unspeakable acts of torture and violence against the local population. Despite, or perhaps because of these accusations, he was praised by his superiors for his effectiveness and promoted through the ranks. Eventually, he rose to the rank of Effendi, the highest position an African could hold in the Corps at the time. His military career was paralleled by a dominant presence in the boxing ring. For 9 years, he was Uganda's undisputed national heavyweight boxing champion, a physical king in a country on the brink of change. His fighting style was as direct as his personality, a relentless, powerful attack that overwhelmed his opponents. His reign as a champion was not just about sports. It was a symbolic act of dominance. He became a folk hero, a man of the people who represented strength and victory in a time of political uncertainty. His image as the strongman of Uganda was a critical foundation for his future ambitions. Following Uganda's independence in 1962, his star continued to rise under the first Prime Minister, Milton Obote. The two were a political duo, though an uneasy one. Obote, an intellectual and a shrewd politician, saw in Amin a powerful ally who could secure the army for him. He elevated Amin to commander of the army, a position that placed all of Uganda's military power in his hands. But as Amin's power grew, so did Obote's paranoia. Obote began to fear that Amin was becoming too popular, too powerful, and too unpredictable. A political game of high-stakes chess began, with both men knowing there could only be one winner. The tension finally boiled over in 1970 when a notorious gold scandal was exposed, implicating Amin in a vast smuggling operation. Obote, fearing that Amin was untouchable, launched an investigation, setting the stage for the dramatic showdown that would change Uganda forever. The simmering tension came to a furious boil in January 1971. President Obote, convinced that Amin was a political threat who needed to be neutralized, had been building a case against him for months. the final straw came in the form of a gold and ivory smuggling investigation. Obote had compiled irrefutable evidence implicating Amin and his close associates in a massive scheme to divert army funds. While Obote was in Singapore for a Commonwealth conference, he sent a fateful message ordering Amin to appear before him to answer for the charges. The trap was set. Sensing the end was near, Idi Amin acted with the speed and brutality that would become his trademark. He was not a man to surrender. He mobilized his most loyal soldiers primarily from his own Kakwa, Lagbara, and West Nile tribes, and executed a plan that was as audacious as it was simple. On January 25, 1971, while the rest of the country slept, Amin launched a blistering and decisive military coup. His troops, divided into small, fast-moving units, seized control of all critical infrastructure. They took Entebbe Airport, Radio Uganda, Parliament, the General Post Office, and Central Barracks. A small contingent of Obote loyalists attempted to resist but were swiftly overwhelmed. Their leaders were executed, and within a single day, Amin had complete control over Uganda. The coup was bloodless for some but deadly for others, especially those loyal to Obote. The day after the coup, Amin appeared on the radio with calculated charm. He claimed his actions were meant to save Uganda from corruption and tyranny. He released a list of 18 reasons for the coup allegations that included mismanagement, political oppression, and tribal favoritism. The Ugandan people, tired of Obote's rule, largely welcomed Amin as a liberator. He promised free elections, peace, and progress. It was a brilliant political performance that disarmed critics and won him broad initial support. But the facade of democracy crumbled within weeks. Amin declared himself president for life and began purging rivals. Starting with officers from Obote's tribal groups, the Akali and Longo, tens of thousands were slaughtered in mass executions. Their bodies dumped in rivers or mass graves. Amin's regime of terror was enforced by two notorious intelligence agencies, the State Research Bureau and the Public Safety Unit. These were not mere law enforcement agencies. They were tools of political extermination. Torture, disappearances, and public executions became routine. One of the most shocking murders was that of Archbishop Chinani Luwum in 1977. Luwum had dared to speak out against the regime's brutality. His death, covered up as a car accident, sent a chilling message to both the church and the people. No one was untouchable. In 1972, Amin expelled Uganda's 80,000-strong Asian community, giving them 90 days to leave. Many of them were citizens, business owners, and vital to the economy. They were stripped of all assets, and their departure led to the collapse of commerce and financial chaos. Amin claimed the move was giving Uganda back to Ugandans, but it was a disastrous and racially charged act. International outrage followed, but Amin dismissed it. The economy, already fragile, went into freefall while Amin continued his bizarre reign. As his grip tightened, Amin's eccentricities became more visible and more dangerous. He declared himself King of Scotland and awarded himself absurd titles such as Conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. He also staged humiliating propaganda stunts to mock foreign powers. Though the world laughed at his bizarre antics, behind the curtain was a brutal despot. Thousands continued to die under his regime. Uganda became a land of whispers, disappearances, and terror. In 1978, Amin made the fatal mistake that would lead to his downfall. To distract from domestic failures, he invaded Tanzania, hoping to ignite nationalist pride. Instead, Tanzania launched a full-scale counter-invasion. The Tanzanian army, joined by Ugandan exiles, crushed Amin's forces. His troops, undisciplined and underpaid, fled or surrendered. Kampala fell on April 11, 1979, and Amin fled into exile. First Libya, then Iraq, and finally Saudi Arabia offered him refuge. Though hundreds of thousands had died under his rule, Amin was never tried for his crimes. He lived comfortably in exile, eventually dying in Jeddah in 2003. He died quietly, far from the screams of his victims and the country he had ravaged. A man once feared and worshipped, now remembered as a brutal tyrant and a symbol of unchecked madness. His story remains a haunting warning of what happens when raw power is left unrestrained.